Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be looking into something pretty terrifying,
Yeah.
honestly. Fatal insomnia.
Yeah.
We've got a pretty good stack of sources to help us unpack all of
Huh?
this. Medical websites like Verywell Health and patient.info,
Right.
a scientific article that really digs deep into eye movements and the early stages of fatal familial insomnia, and a detailed report from the National Organization for Rare Disorders, or NORDAY.
All right.
And our mission today is to try to really understand fatal insomnia. What causes it? What are the symptoms? And ultimately, how does it lead to death?
I think this is something that really speaks to a primal fear.
Yeah.
You know, the fear of losing your mind, of your body betraying you, and the science behind it is fascinating and unsettling.
Yeah, it is. It is unsettling. Just the name itself, fatal insomnia, is enough to send chills down your spine.
It is.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is fatal insomnia?
So fatal insomnia, or FI, is a prion disease. This means it's caused by misfolded proteins in the brain. These rogue proteins are called prions, and they clump together and essentially disrupt the brain's ability to function. Think of it like a domino effect.
Okay.
One misfolded protein triggers others to misfold, leading to this cascade of damage.
So it's not just a single protein malfunctioning. It's like a chain reaction
Yeah.
of destruction
Exactly.
at a molecular level.
Exactly. And to make it even more frightening, there are two main forms of this disease. Fatal familial insomnia, or FFI, which is inherited,
Right.
and sporadic fatal insomnia, SFI, which occurs randomly with no family history.
Oh, wow.
Both are incredibly rare, but SFI is even less common.
So in one case, you inherit this terrifying fate, and in the other, it just seems to strike out of nowhere.
Right.
That's scary. And what I find particularly unsettling is that prion diseases, like fatal insomnia, have a long incubation period.
Yes.
You can have these misfolded proteins lurking in your brain for years, even decades, without any symptoms.
That's right.
But once those symptoms start, the disease progresses rapidly.
Yeah, that's one of the hallmarks of prion diseases. It's like a ticking time bomb. It's silently and slowly wreaking havoc until it finally explodes.
Oh.
When it does, the effects are devastating.
Well, let's talk about those effects. I think most people can guess the most obvious symptom given the name.
Of course.
Yeah.
The most prominent symptom is progressive and relentless insomnia. But it's not just difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep.
Right.
We're talking about the complete inability to sleep,
Wow.
which leads to a cascade of physical and mental deterioration. It's a truly horrifying experience.
Like your own body is turning against you, denying you one of the most basic human needs, sleep. And from what we've read, it seems like the disease unfolds in 4 distinct stages,
That's right.
each more terrifying than the last.
Yes. The first stage is marked by increasing insomnia, often accompanied by anxiety, panic attacks, and even phobias. As the disease progresses to stage 2, hallucinations and panic attacks become more pronounced, and the insomnia intensifies.
So you're not only robbed of sleep, but your mind starts to play tricks on you, creating a living nightmare.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
And then you enter stage 3, where sleep becomes completely impossible.
wow.
You experience drastic weight loss, and your body's basic functions start to go haywire.
That sounds like a complete unraveling of both mind and body.
That's a very accurate description.
Wow.
And sadly, the final stage brings dementia, leaving the individual unresponsive and ultimately leading to coma and death. It's a heartbreaking and terrifying journey.
It's hard to even imagine the terror and despair that someone must feel as they go through that progression.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, insomnia is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's a whole constellation of other symptoms,
Right.
many of them tied to the autonomic nervous system going haywire.
You're absolutely right. The autonomic nervous system controls all those vital functions we don't consciously think about. Breathing, heart rate, digestion, temperature regulation. As the disease progresses, we see things like fever, rapid heart rate, high blood pressure, and profuse sweating. Some individuals experience problems with swallowing, slurred speech, or difficulty coordinating movements.
So it's not just the mind that's under attack. It's like the disease is systematically shutting down the entire body.
It is.
And I can't even begin to imagine the psychological toll this must take on someone. The fear and anxiety, knowing that your own body is betraying you.
The psychological impact of this disease is profound. Anxiety and depression are very common, as are the hallucinations and paranoia we mentioned earlier.
Right.
It's truly a harrowing experience, a waking nightmare with no escape.
This is all so disturbing. It makes you appreciate just how fragile we are.
Mm-hmm.
But let's Let's try to understand the mechanics of this disease. What exactly is happening in the brain that causes this cascade of horrifying symptoms?
The key lies in understanding which part of the brain is primarily attacked. The thalamus.
The thalamus.
Yes.
I vaguely remember that from biology class. Can you remind me what that part of the brain does?
Think of the thalamus as the brain's central relay station.
Okay.
It's a deep brain structure responsible for regulating a wide range of crucial functions, including sleep, sensory input, motor signals, alertness, and even consciousness.
So when the thalamus is compromised, it's like the control center is malfunctioning, sending out garbled signals,
Yeah,
causing all of these terrifying symptoms.
exactly. In fatal insomnia, those misfolded prion proteins accumulate in the thalamus,
Okay.
causing progressive damage and death of neurons. And as the damage spreads, the symptoms worsen.
So the more prions accumulate, the more the thalamus deteriorates,
Yeah.
and the more severe the symptoms become.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle of destruction.
Precisely. And the thalamus damage also helps to explain many of the specific symptoms we see in fatal insomnia. The insomnia, the autonomic dysfunction, the motor problems all stem from the progressive deterioration of this crucial brain structure.
It's remarkable and disturbing how one tiny structure in the brain can have such a profound impact on the entire body.
Yeah.
Are there any specific observations about how these prions attack the brain that help us understand this better?
There is one particularly interesting observation related to eye movements.
Okay.
Studies have shown that people with fatal insomnia often exhibit something called excessive saccadic intrusions, even in the early stages of the disease.
Saccadic intrusions. That sounds pretty technical. What exactly does that mean?
So saccades are those rapid, jerky eye movements we make when we shift our gaze from one point to another.
Okay.
Everyone has them. But in fatal insomnia, these saccades become much more frequent and intrusive, making it difficult for the person to maintain steady fixation on an object. Their eyes are constantly jumping around, even when they're trying to focus.
Wow, that must be incredibly disorienting and frustrating on top of everything else they're going through.
Exactly.
It's like their own eyes are betraying them.
Exactly. And this further underscores the thalamus's crucial role in controlling even the most basic functions, like how we move our eyes.
This deep dive into the symptoms and brain mechanics of fatal insomnia has been truly eye-opening
Yeah.
in a rather unsettling way. Now I think it's time to take a closer look at how this devastating disease is diagnosed.
Of course. Diagnosing fatal insomnia can be tricky, especially in the early stages, because its symptoms can mimic other conditions.
Right.
And its rarity makes it less likely to be considered initially.
So it's a bit of a diagnostic puzzle.
Yeah.
What tools do doctors use to piece together this diagnosis?
Several tools are used. Sleep studies, called polysomnography, can reveal abnormalities in sleep patterns in the different sleep stages. PET scans can also provide valuable insights, particularly in detecting the characteristic reduction in metabolic activity in the thalamus.
So the PE scan can essentially reveal the damage that's already been done to the thalamus by those rogue prions. And I'm guessing genetic testing also plays a role, especially for the familial form of the disease.
Absolutely. For FFI, genetic testing is crucial.
Right.
It can identify the specific PRNP gene mutation associated with the disease, confirming the diagnosis. However, genetic testing is less helpful in cases of SFI because, as we discussed, there's no known genetic cause for that form.
So even with these advanced tools, diagnosis remains a challenge. And sadly, from what we've discussed so far, it sounds like even if you do get a diagnosis of fatal insomnia, the outlook isn't very hopeful.
That's the most heartbreaking aspect of this disease. There is currently no cure for fatal insomnia.
Wow.
Treatment is focused on managing the symptoms and providing comfort care, trying to make the patient as comfortable as possible as the disease takes its course.
It's a devastating reality for those facing this rare and terrifying disease. Before we delve into the specifics of FFI and SFI, I want to touch on something that's come up a few times in our research: how long a person can actually go without sleep.
It's a question that speaks to our morbid curiosity, but it also highlights the fundamental importance of sleep for human survival.
So what is the longest recorded instance of someone going without sleep?
The longest recorded instance of sleep deprivation was a scientific experiment where a teenager voluntarily stayed awake for 264 hours. That's just over 10 days.
10 days. It's hard to fathom how exhausted he must have been.
It's an extreme example and definitely not something anyone should try to replicate. It's important to stress that chronic sleep deprivation, even in less extreme forms, has very serious consequences for our health.
That's a good point to end part one of our deep dives. We've learned that fatal insomnia, whether inherited or sporadic, is a devastating disease with a truly horrifying progression. We've explored the chilling symptoms, from the obvious insomnia to the terrifying autonomic nervous system dysfunction, and we've peered into the brain to understand how damage to the thalamus, that central relay station, orchestrates this tragic cascade of events. We've even touched on the limits of human endurance when it comes to sleep deprivation. But there's much more to uncover about this rare and relentless disease. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into fatal insomnia.